As a Rhodes Scholar, David went to Oxford. Henrietta Dombey remembers his astonishing good looks and his razor-sharp intelligence. His apparent languor really an acute alertness. Gentle intensity, she says, as he invited you to share the musical experience of the moment.
To hear it properly. And the thing was that David would insist on that, and it's kind of like what you say, you kind of, as he expected you to read it in the original French, we were expected to appreciate everything that he appreciated. It was this extraordinary generosity. He thought that you had some faint hope of being somewhere on his wavelength, and that was what was so remarkable. I remember once going into Blackwell's bookshop, which was his sort of home from Magdalen, really, because you'd go into Blackwell's bookshop and David would be leaning up against the wall, reading something with his extraordinary gentle intensity, and he would look up and he would notice you, you know, he wouldn't kind of be so lost that he wouldn't notice you. And then he would say, of a book published maybe 5 days ago, "Oh, have you never read A Severed Head?" And you know, you'd have to admit that you hadn't actually managed to get round to that yet, and so on. And the thing is that all this endures with David. There's always this wonderful generosity, always this expectation that we too can participate in this extraordinary imaginative and bold life, always making things special all around him. And it endures through the years, and actually the friendships endure. These people from Nova Scotia are writing today because they're still friends of his. And, you know, we're all still there. We're all still there because he's so wonderful at keeping us all still with him. And to David in his generosity.
Yes. Do shout at me if you can't hear. Not that you'll miss very much, I think. I met David in, I think it was 1958. And yes,
you can hear. You can still hear. You can turn in circles if you like.
I'll turn in circles. My back there.
Yes, that's good. That's good.
I met David in 1958. I was a very slow developer. I came from Stoke-on-Trent, a high seat of culture, and I'd just been in the RAF for 2 years, and I knew nothing about anything, really. Well, something about Schoenberg and Weber, perhaps, but not much about anything else. And David was pointed out to me, this very handsome, golden-haired youth, tall, easygoing, and I was told that he's a brilliant pianist. And indeed, when I heard him play the Hinastera Sonata some months later, that was clearly evident, that he was researching in Hegel. Who's Hegel, I thought? That he had been a child actor, which you've already heard about. That he used to zoom off to London practically every day to see at least 2 films, read a couple of books on the way there, on the way back, and also do all this research into some aspect of Hegel. This was all deeply impressive, and I must say I felt completely lost at being in his company. I didn't feel part of his world at all. Miraculously, our friendship has survived now 50 years, David, and I suppose I'm a bit of a tortoise. He was certainly a hare, because he'd done an amazing number of things by the time he arrived at Oxford. I've slowly gathered myself together over the years to become some kind of composer. And I have to say that in his quiet way, David has always supported me and my work, and I really appreciate that. And I'm very pleased that I wrote a piece called Bartók's Umbrella for piano and percussion, And fortunately last year I had a most wonderful, wonderful performance of this work in Hungary, and it gave me great delight to dedicate this work to David and Dinah and to give them a CD of the work, and that gives me great pleasure. And thank you, David.
It's a lovely work, and thank you very much. Next is Neville Linton.
I'm from the Caribbean, and I met David in Edmonton, Alberta, which surprises many people. That's what either David or I was doing in Edmonton, Alberta. We were both teaching at the University of Alberta, and the University of Alberta had a lot of money, and like Texas, created for a while, initially, and it continued after, for about 10 years. It imported staff by paying very high salaries and got in some very talented people, of whom David is an obvious example. David was in fact a member of one of the easily outstanding philosophy departments across North America at that time, which attracted students internationally, not just from North America, and staff internationally. One thing leads to another, and so you had this very significant philosophy department of which David was a star. I myself was teaching international relations. As I said, the university did have a lot of money. It even had Nobel Prize winners. So you had a situation in which you had an international staff and a very domestic, almost reactionary student body. And that led to interesting situations in which the university, someone reminded me tonight, the university staff, faculty would go on strike, and the students were not on strike. Because this period that I'm speaking about is at the height of the Vietnam War, and this international staff took very strong positions on that. But that's not what I really need to talk about, that's just to give you the setting. Now I got into Alberta, I won't explain why, but getting into Alberta I found it far more interesting than I could possibly have hoped for, because of the bunch of people that I settled into, in which David was certainly part of the centre. The philosophy department, as I said, was outstanding. It not only attracted international students, international staffs, but as you will hear possibly later, it had good parties, and David himself tonight is a very modest example of the sort of party that a David Murray can throw. And there were marvellous parties. I won't speak about those parties. I'll speak more about the quieter evenings, because it was the time of the Vietnam War. We'd meet at David's house for what I suppose in the old days would have been called soirees, and a group would sit, we'd be eating, chatting, drinking wine of course, listening to music. David would play. He had a grand then in Alberta in his living room. David would play, and we'd have these marvellous evenings, which I remember and have not been able to recreate or get since. But the thing that I remember about David is that I really envied his lifestyle when I realized what it was. Every summer David would disappear. Where would David disappear? David disappeared to Europe, where he was doing reviews. So we had trips across Europe to all of the festivals, reviewing at someone else's expense, and then come back to the wastes of Alberta for the next year, and had this very idealized style. And through this mix of the company with David and others, as I said, it really made for a fascinating time in what was a really cold, remote western part of Alberta. Now, David's role, some of this I think will be touched upon in the thing that will be read out, because of his role in music and arts. In Alberta, not only was there a reasonable university because of money, in the same period that we were there, Alberta started an opera, it started a symphony, it started a repertory theatre. And in all of these areas of the arts, the people from those areas and who wanted to get that sort of thing going in Alberta would be people who would be mixing in the circle that David was part of the centre of. So David's role in terms of stimulating this sort of thing in Alberta was crucial, whether or not many Albertans know that or not. So to that, cheers.